Quick question, what does Gallagher, Bill Hicks, and George Carlin all have in common? Well, they're all comedians. They were all famous and active in different eras of comedy. They all rose to a certain level of fame. And they're all social commentators to some degree. And I happen to be a fan of all three of them. Hey, welcome to the Paisley Couch, everyone. It's I, the amazing Flec, and of course my faithful manager, Lucy the cat. She's taking a little nap, so we'll try to keep things down. She's my PR agent and per agent. If you're new to this channel, I post a lot about a lot of different things. So if comedians don't interest you, then maybe check out my playlist section to see if there's something there that does. I post a lot of different content about a lot of different subjects. So go check it out. But if you like comedians and comedy, and any one of those three comedians pique your interest, hey, maybe check this one out. So I remember watching Gallagher as a young man on TV, and as a young man not really understanding a lot of the political satire and the social commentary that he was telling jokes about, and even just telling stories about. I found myself just straight up intrigued with the amount of different props he used on his set, the over-the-top things he did, like turning that couch into a trampoline, and how he did his signature sledge-o-matic routine when he smashed those watermelons and other assorted foods and non-food products that would go splat everywhere across the front row. And I remember seeing a lot of different people in the first two rows. They had tarps to prepare for this act every time they went to go see him. Looking back, when I was a child, I didn't fully understand the scope of his jokes, but he was cartoony enough and animated enough and did a lot of like over-the-top kind of pantomime comedy mixed with just ridiculous stuff. And he was really crafty with words and wordplay. That's something I think all three of them also have in common to some degree, is a good artful use of language and words. But Gallagher, though, I feel like was way ahead of his time in that regard, where he had a really good sense of delivery, great cadence and timing with telling his jokes, and kind of brought to light a lot of political and social issues, and he did it in a way that was most palatable, using comedy. Comedy's a great tool for telling the truth. While some people might pass off Gallagher as just another prop comedian and someone who relied too heavily on props for his jokes, I think it was a lot more than that. If you really watch some of his older material, you can see that he is light years ahead of other comedians in his time as far as social commentary goes specifically, and also the clever wordplay is really something really cool. Like, he had his own thing going on, and you can see that other comedians would also try to mimic it to some degree and achieved success by doing so. But I think you can say every performance artist and comedian and actor have been heavily influenced by other artists, comedians, and actors, or have influenced other artists and comedians and actors. If you're really good, you'll end up influencing a lot of people if you're famous enough and if your material is tight enough. So I guess it's a compliment in a certain degree. If you are really good at what you're doing, other people are going to start doing it too, to follow that map or model of success. So next, that brings us to George Carlin. I think George Carlin was also often mimicked by other artists that were starting out. George Carlin was really good with the art of rhetoric and keeping a good beat and a good cadence and a good flow to his storytelling and his joke telling, in my opinion. I think he was just legendary at it, and I think a lot of people would have to agree also. He's regarded as one of the most influential comedians of our time, in fact. And what he did in 1978 with the Supreme Court case of FCC versus the Pacifica Corporation was legendary. His 7 dirty words routine was something that played a heavy role in the decision-making process of that case. That case resulted in a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court. The US government has a right to censor certain materials, and that his routine was considered indecent but not obscene, meaning that they could censor it to where kids couldn't see it or hear it. The best that the US government can do something like that. But also they didn't completely can it altogether and erase it. That would be too much censorship, according to the ruling of the courts. So it's pretty amazing that George Carlin's material had an influencing factor on the US Supreme Court's decision-making process when it comes to the issue of censorship. But George Carlin, if you watch some of his earlier material, he was more of like an animated kind of clowny character. I didn't really feel like he was as funny when in his younger years. And he got more and more sharp and more talented as he got older. And his tact and his ability to communicate the ridiculousness and the oxymorons and the hypocrisy of our society as a whole and the institutions in power and control. He was really good at speaking truth to power, in my opinion. He had a touch of misogyny in there. I think all three of these comedians did. They come from a different time and all that. A little bit of misogyny, a little bit of he-manness and all of that. But I don't think that was a central part of his comedy. It wasn't supposed to be that way, at least. I think he was more keen on being a social commentator, one who was pushing his audiences to think critically and to recognize the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness that our society perpetuates, on both the right and the left. He had something to say and something to knock on all sides of the political arena, whether you're a conservative or a liberal. And I think it's real important for you to be able to laugh at yourself, wherever on that spectrum you lie, to be able to laugh at yourself and recognize the general hypocrisy and the general ridiculousness of conformity culture and of identity politics. So I think George Carlin was hands down one of the most influential comedians of our era. Did something that no one else could really do, and he did a wonderful job doing it too. Now this leads us to Bill Hicks, the last comedian I like to talk about. Bill Hicks, I think, was very much underrated and underappreciated for when he was most active in his career. And I think even after he died, he rose in popularity and fame quite a bit. But I don't think that he's fully appreciated or understood to the degree that I think he would have liked to have been, or that I would like people to also appreciate him also. Bill Hicks had this style when he was on stage where he was just incredibly relaxed. He was at home on stage, and he had no problems delivering his material, even when he was at his worst and he had his hardest times. And you watch these rare videos of him performing on stage when he loses it on his audience for yelling, "Freebird, play Freebird," and things like that. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's a corker. You gotta check it out. But Bill Hicks was just really at ease with himself on stage, or at least he made everyone feel that way. He's very, very calm with his delivery, but he also had really good comedic timing. He was really good at putting calculated pauses in to build suspense before he delivered the punchline. And the way he talked about pop culture and various political and religious institutions to point out the flaws and the holes in the logic and the hypocrisy of various social, political, and religious institutions was very much welcome and needed for that time and place, in my opinion. And sure, I'm sure there was a lot of other artists that were also doing work similar to what he was doing. The scope and the reach and the role that he did play for that time was unparalleled and was very much needed, I feel, in the world of comedy and also in the world of social commentary. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of a band called Tool. I, for one, am a fan of this band, and so was Bill Hicks. Tool was also a big fan of Bill Hicks. So much, in fact, they dedicated their album Enema to Bill Hicks. And they also actually feature a line in one of Bill Hicks's shows, one where he's ranting about various substances and how they've influenced various artists and musicians over the years. You can probably figure that one out if you search for it online. But I really like it when artists, comedians, actors, musicians recognize each other's talent and recognize what they're trying to accomplish with their art and their media, and they work together like that. Another example of that, you can see that with Neil Gaiman and Torrey Amos, where there was a lot of appreciation and cross-pollination with their art form, where they would reference each other in their own art and media, and I thought that was really cool. I guess another thing all three of these comedians have in common is I feel that to some degree they were misunderstood as to the roles they were playing in the time that they were in, and I think they're all underrated for the times they came through. I know that can be argued that George Carlin was overrated, or that Gallagher was overrated, or that Bill Hicks was more likely underrated, but some people might think that he was praised too much for what he did. But if you ever tried to write any sort of comedic pieces, or if you've ever tried to do stand-up comedy, or if you're an artist or performer of any kind, you can take a look at the work of all three of these artists and you can really start appreciating it a lot more. It's kind of like the difference of being a critic of movies and film or music and not actually ever making any music, movies, or art yourself. You're just really good at recognizing and nitpicking and seeing what's good and what's bad, but you have no idea about the creative process or the amount of time and energy it takes to create some sort of art or media. And you might tear it all apart without knowing a single thing about all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. I guess at the end of the day, we're all a critic, we all have our own opinions, but these are just three comedians that I really liked and I've really enjoyed over the years. And they've all influenced me to some degree, maybe not so much in my own performances or in my art that I create, but most definitely in my inner being of who I am on the inside. Now, I don't mean that I want to walk around and act like Gallagher or George Carlin or Bill Hicks. I'm my own person. And I think that they've all helped me to some degree or influenced me to become my own person. They've also helped me recognize certain parts of myself that I might have been in denial of or that I might have put in the background or in the shadow of my own psychology, and helped me to recognize those and bring them to light and take a look at them for what they are and recognize them and not be in denial. They all had a certain element of darkness to their comedy as well. Maybe not so much Gallagher, but George Carlin and Bill Hicks definitely had a very dark side to their comedy. And I think that's important with comedy in general, is having that element of darkness. You can't have comedy without drama, for instance, because that dichotomy of going from one direction to the other is something that really helps the whole comedic delivery. One comedian and magician that I have a lot of respect for and admired over the years, ever since I was a child, was someone who went by the name Psoriasis on stage. And he was a comedian and magician at the Michigan Renaissance Festival, and he also performed at various other Renaissance festivals also. So people called him Psoriasis. I just called him Steve because that's what his real name was. And he was really kind. He would come up to me in the mornings before the festival would open up, and he would give me some pointers without actually suggesting that he was giving me pointers. He would show me comedy rather than tell me what to do. He would give me some ideas, and I thought that I came up with these ideas, and I realized, no, Steve put those ideas in my brain there. And one thing I liked what he said was, comedy's really good at taking you in one direction and then yanking you in another direction. So that's the art of storytelling, and that's the art of telling a good joke. You lead in, and you're along for the ride, and you go on this ride where you go in a certain direction, and then the punchline takes you somewhere completely different, where you didn't think that that's where the story was really going, but then it yanks you over there. So a good punchline will do that for you. And I think that all three of these comedians knew that theory all too well. And a bunch of other theories that I'm completely oblivious to and that I'm not articulating very well on this video here today. But thanks for watching, everyone. Those are just three comedians that I've enjoyed very much over the years, that have influenced me as a human being, and maybe also as an artist as well. And we're just spectacular at the art of social commentary and pointing out the flaws and the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of society in general. Oh yeah, and if you haven't done it already, check out my playlist section. I post a lot of content. I post every single day of this year. So for the year of 2021, I will post a new video every single day on a variety of different subjects. Some days it's just a blog telling you about what I did. Some days, like today, it's about something niche, like comedy. Sometimes it's about language, sometimes it's about logic, sometimes about philosophy. But once a week I do post a video on the circus and flow arts. So if you want to learn how to juggle or spin things on your fingers or walk tight ropes, hey, I'm your guy. Go check out my playlist section for the circus and flow arts tutorials. You won't lose too many brain cells, I promise. And that's a wrap, folks. So from me and Lucy the cat, she's still sleeping, we like to remind you all to keep safe, be well, stay humble, and peace.